Maddy Harland and I am at the Oxford Real Farming Conference 2023 and I have such an honour and a delight to be with Vandana Shiva.
Hello, Maddy.
Hello. I wanted to ask you, I wonder if we could start at the beginning. So there you are as a PhD student in, it's quantum theory?
In quantum theory?
Yeah. And you decide to give up this academic career. I wonder, what were the influences? Where did you realise that wisdom and knowledge was not to be found on that life path?
I realised it extremely early because even while doing my PhD, I got involved in the Chipko Movement. It was this amazing movement of women in my region who said, we're going to hug the trees, we will not let you destroy the Himalayan forests, which are leading to floods and landslides and drought. And that changed India's policies. But for 10 years I volunteered with them and I knew there was knowledge there, in the forest, in the women of the forest, that nature is there to give us knowledge. And we had kind of followed a path where we assumed that knowledge lies only in university systems, which then are being driven by the big money system now, increasingly with globalization. But when I left in 1982, I'd been asked by government to do a few studies on the impact of mining in my valley. So I returned from Bangalore to Dehradun on the impact of eucalyptus planting on agriculture. And I realized that a few studies done in appropriate response to the pain of the earth and the pain of people in an honest way had a much bigger purpose and a much bigger impact than continuing in institutional systems where you just have to churn out and churn out and churn out academic output. So I realized that I have to dedicate my life in the service of the earth and learn whatever it takes. I then decided I'd be a permanent learner. I didn't know what would happen to me because we are made to feel that the check at the end of a month is the basis for security. And when you chuck that check and throw yourselves to the universe and say, I'm here to do the right thing, you don't know where it will take you. So I took that risk and I have no regrets.
And you spoke this morning about how you could see from this experience of working with these women the deep interconnection between the forest, between the water system, between agriculture. That for them that was not obvious.
Yeah, for the women it was totally obvious that the forests of particular kind, the oak forest, the native forests, in the high mountains where we get, in one day in our monsoons, we get as much rain as England gets over the year. Mm. So the kind of force of that water needs the protection of the forest. And the women knew it through their indigenous knowledge, but they knew it through their experience. And then I realized that what my training had given me was the ability to write scientific papers, to do scientific analysis, and I started to back up whatever they were already saying with the scientific evidence of forest ecosystems and their role in the hydrological cycle, forest ecosystem and then role in the nutrition cycle. And in a way that became my learning and education. Today that knowledge is called ecological services of forests and ecosystems. For the women, 872 was the first environmental conference in Stockholm. They weren't talking that language, but the women had that knowledge.
And that knowledge is ancient knowledge, isn't it?
It's ancient knowledge. It's ancient knowledge.
For thousands, it has been known for thousands of years and certainly lost through civilization.
Yeah, and I think the word civilization, which should mean that which holds together, ended up because of colonialism, meaning that which gives us an excuse to dominate someone else, that we are civilized and you're barbarians, which was the language of the civilizing mission. And the chief advisor of science, I think David King his name is, He said, the reason we have to make changes is in order to protect civilization. Well, if your yardstick is protecting this colonizing civilization, you cannot protect the earth. You have to give up its premises. The earth, nature is dead and raw material. People who know nature as part of it are stupid and primitive. You have to give up those basic assumptions and realize that anthropocentric arrogance and Eurocentric arrogance are at the root of the problem. And we've got to move beyond.
And also this kind of disdain for an understanding of the animate earth as being primitive belief system rather than a reality of the intelligence of life on earth. And you said a very beautiful thing about the seed this morning, what the seed teaches us. And I could paraphrase, but you'll say it much better than me, that the seed, life is living, and that life is self-organising, and life is abundant. And it's the, scarcity is the cachet of Adam Smith and all of that Western economic thinking.
Yeah, because I'm very fortunate that I've brought all these fathers of modern economics, father of modern science, father of this and the father of that. In my adulthood, when I've already got the experiences of Chipko, of a living earth, of my quantum understanding of the world as interrelated, my thesis was on non-locality in quantum theory. The mechanistic philosophy says everything is separate. Everything is an essential particle, immovable, inert. Quantum theory tells you just the opposite. So whether it's my scientific training or my ecological experience or my scientific studies in ecology, I've realized that, a whole structure was created to make it look like nature creates scarcity. Declaring war against nature is the path of growth. And the economic system created by Adam Smith was really a narrative that described colonial commerce. John Locke described the enclosures as the creation of property. Bacon described the separation from nature, the conquest of nature, the torture of nature as modern science. The Royal Society says its purpose is to bring the masculine philosophy of Bacon as the dominant philosophy. The witch hunts preceded all that. So I think we as human beings are alive on a living planet. That denial is the root of the ecological crisis, but that denial is also the root of injustice, of appropriating the resources of the people and leaving them with nothing. The cost of living crisis, as it's called right now, is really the end point of a displacement crisis. If people were on the land, they could grow the food. The cost of living crisis wouldn't affect them. If people were doing ecological agriculture, permaculture, they would be able to grow food without fertilizers. The doubling of fertilizer prices wouldn't affect you at all. The long distance supply chains wouldn't affect you. So the prisons that were created through this idea of separation, mechanistic idea of scarcity, because if something is dead, it can't multiply. But the nature of the living is constant regeneration. And that's where the abundance comes from. So the mechanical thought and the notion of scarcity and the economics based on competition for scarce resources all fall into place together. Whereas living with the living seed, living with the living soil, regenerating it, and living in living communities, building the living economies, suddenly gives you the possibilities to create and share abundance.
Could you just sum up or explain to me a little more of the roots of the Poison Cartel, as you call it, what it is and what's happening at the moment in the world?
Well, I call a group of companies that function as a cartel that make poisons, the Poison Cartel. Their roots are Hitler's Germany. Hitler took the expertise of the companies that were just emerging in the chemical sector to make synthetic dyes and replace the natural dyes like indigo. These were the buyers, the BASFs, and they became IG Farben, the chemical cartel of Hitler. But they couldn't work alone because the chemicals needed fossil fuels, and that came from Standard Oil, and they needed finance, and that too came from Mr. Rockefeller. Rockefeller is behind a concentration, he's behind the oil century, the century of oil. He's behind Big Pharma. You know, he basically shut down all systems of healing that are not violent. And he's behind the financial system as we know it today. So he joined hands, and there was a company called IG Farben, Standard Oil. And I've written about it in my book, Wonder Sources, the 1%. So with fossil fuels, finance, and the ability to make synthetic chemicals, they then made the poison gases. They made xylon B. The poison gas and xylon B became the ancestors of pesticides. The systems that use fossil fuel to fix atmospheric nitrogen at very high temperature made ammunitions and explosives as well as urea. So all the agrochemicals of today come from that early experimentation with making chemicals that kill originally human beings, then insects, plants, and also human beings, because 200,000 people die annually because of pesticide poisoning. In India, the city of Bhopal got devastated in 1984, 2nd December night, because a pesticide plant leaked. I call them a poison cartel not only because they make poisons, but they change their names so frequently because they merge and merge and merge. At a meeting where they laid out the plan of owning the sea through genetic engineering in 1987, there used to be Ciba, Sandoz, AstraZeneca, 4 companies. All of these are now Syngenta together. There used to be Union Carbide that killed people in Bhopal, merged with Dow merged with DuPont, now they're Corteva. So I realized if you keep giving these new names, you know, people blank out about what's happening. So I said, stick to the fact. The 4 of them, they make poison, they function like a cartel. A cartel means they hijack your policy, they hijack your science. Their skill is making poison to kill. And that's why you have an ecocide. That's why the insects are disappearing. The whole fertilizer business is such a big contributor to climate change. And it's not talked about. Nitrous oxide is not talked about. It's 300 times more damaging.
I was going to say, yeah.
300 times more damaging. So the roots are really Hitler's war, and by bringing those chemicals into agriculture, they've turned agriculture into a war against the soil organisms, against the insect biodiversity, the bees and the pollinators, against the farmer who works with the land. And so all the different movements, some care about insects, some care about the soil ecology, all of them are facing the same common threat of the poison cartel. And that's why in 2017, I brought together different movements, including the government of Sikkim, which had declared the whole state as organic. And we launched a poison-free food and farming movement. So the answer to the poison cartel is farm without poisons, grow food without poisons, eat food without poisons. That's revolutionary.
Yes, it's the essence, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, you are a very fearless activist, and you've been fearlessly standing up and very visibly speaking out for many decades now. How do you see us as a group of allies globally building our movement to become more effective, better at speaking out, better at standing up?
Well, the first is, we are not standing alone when we stand up against the poison cartel. You're standing with all the organisms of the soil. You're standing with all the insects of the world, and all the bees and pollinators and the butterflies. You're standing with all the biodiversity of plants. You're standing with your gut microbiomes and saying, I will not damage you. You take care of my health, I'll take care of yours. So knowing that we are part of the web of life, when that consciousness guides your activism, you come from a place of protection and love. And just like a mother will defend her child fearlessly, we have to defend Mother Earth fearlessly. That's where lasting activism comes from. Activism that it doesn't exhaust itself, because it comes from love, and love doesn't exhaust itself.
So what would your advice be to a young person now, just their eyes just being open to this other way of living, other way of being, and also a different way of perceiving the world, and perhaps just beginning to learn about what the idea of the Poison Cartel and the fact that there are 4 corporations fundamentally controlling the seeds and the chemicals and the oil and basically all of those fossil fuel end game industries for this planet. What's your advice to them? You took this incredibly brave step as a young woman to step out of a safe career path and into what was unknown. I mean, most people weren't even thinking about the effect of colonial agriculture and the Green Revolution and what that was going to do to the land and also to the people, and how it was a mechanism of theft. So now, in this century...
As a principle, I don't give advice because I think it's a bit arrogant. But I can definitely give an invitation.
Well, I'm asking you, yes.
An invitation is, I'm happy to share what I've learned in now a 70-year life. First, that do not live by the illusions and constructions of scarcity. Live by your understanding of the potential of the earth and your potential. And explore that potential. And the systems that tell you you can't do this and you can't do that are not the systems that should guide you. Your conscience, ecological principles, and the right action. Second is, never ever feel you're too small to make a difference. What I've learned from the seed over these many years is the seed is powerful because it's small. A bomb can be dropped and destroy a civilization. But a seed saved somewhere in a corner can still regenerate life. And I have seen after the Fukushima disaster how the ecological farmers were able to continue farming and organic systems were pulling even the radioactivity out of the fungal links. So the healing capacity of living systems is huge. And that is where, A, you need to learn, 2, you need to put your trust and your service. And of course find places where this is precisely what's being done, so you don't have to constantly kind of grope in the dark. Places like Schumacher College, places like the Earth University at Navdanya that I started, where all of this learning from nature, from farmers, from peasants, and the research we do in partnership. Our research is a partnership research. Everything I do, I work with the recognition that the earth is alive. And how do you know a living earth? Not through violent means, but through non-violent means of humility. And it teaches you a lot. So, just get rid of all the constructive fears.
And just a personal question now, if I may. What makes your heart sing? You are a joyous person and you're incredibly alive. Just being with you is very uplifting. What gives you deep joy in your life?
I think the deep joy in my life is service and compassion. To feel the hurt, that's what put me down the path of Chipko, hurt of the forest when I saw forest disappear. But the joy of living through life itself. Joy of living is not an anthropocentric activity. Joy of living is an related activity of life and celebration. And becoming part of that is what gives me joy and gives me renewal. And a lot of people say, oh, you've been doing this for so long, it's half a century, and don't you get exhausted? And I say, does the seed get exhausted and say, I won't give the next generation, only the non-renewable seeds that are patented and genetically modified? They are designed for exhaustion, but life is exhaustless. It's negative entropy systems. Renewal is its very urge, its very purpose. And being part of it is then being part of the flow of life, the flow of joy.
Thank you very much. Thank you for talking to us today.